Hi, I'm Denan Kemp. I just did the new episode of Straight Talk with Mark Bouris. Extremely excited to be on this episode. Mark Bouris, a huge idol of mine when it comes to business in Australia. We talked about footy, we talked about what's going on at the Roosters, we talked about Bloke in a bar, but most of all, we talked about some pretty deep issues when it comes to, just men in Australia. So tune in and enjoy it, guys.
G'day and welcome to Straight Talk, another episode. Actually, it's sort of a bit cool, like we're sort of sitting on the orange chairs. And my guest today is, I've actually had, you can see it's a bloke in a bar, but I've actually had him on my show before, but I've had him in my podcast. His name's Denan Kemp, and he's the founder, and I guess CEO, or he's the main dude anyway, at a business called Bloke in a Bar. He's got a podcast. He's an ex-Rugby League player. I've got him here because he's done something, for me anyway, I think he's had a phenomenal rise in the last 12 to 18 months. Not just in terms of his beer business. I was looking at where all his beer business, or where his beer is actually being distributed from on his website. There's like a shitload of places. But he's done something quite phenomenal in terms of how he's marketed his business, and I want to talk to him about marketing his business, how he's done that. It's a bloody fantastic strategy, I think. So welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Thanks for having me again. Very excited.
I don't know how many years ago was it you were on my podcast?
Mate, it would have been 3.5 years.
I think it might have just kicked off the Mentor podcast, or maybe 4 years. But you would have been one of our early ones, and wow, you've come a long way since then. I think I got a feeling that the colouring has changed in the way you box your beer. Was your beer boxed differently 3.5 years ago?
What's funny is that, like, the podcast that we did, years ago, I think it was off air. You said to me, you'll change that, the design of it.
Yeah.
And it was confronting, because obviously, like, that was my baby and whatever. But I thought about it. I honestly thought about you saying that once a week. And that's no word of a lie. Because, like, what is he seeing that I'm not seeing, with his experience and his ability to say that so confidently? And we changed it.
That's good. I like that one.
Yeah.
I'm just not saying because I did say it before, but that's much better than what I remember the last one for anyway. And I look, let's just start straight up. Like, I want to quickly talk about who you are. Like, I heard, someone told me, I don't know if it's true or not, that as a young guy, you never really started playing rugby league until you were about 16, 17 years of age.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
You played soccer?
Yep, full and serious soccer. Like
serious soccer.
Queensland Royal Reserve grade. So.
And I also heard that you were pretty quick.
I was. That was my asset. Absolutely.
You could run.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you ended up playing rugby league, but how was it you got recruited for rugby league? Tell everyone how that happened.
So basically, I was playing soccer. To kind of put it in focus as to, why I was playing soccer and also where the trajectory of what I wanted to do. My brother was over in England at this time chasing his soccer dream. So we were, elite soccer players, made all the Queensland sides, all the rep sides. And the path at that time was basically you either go to England, because the national was called the NSL, I think back then, National Soccer League. And so the A-League wasn't in yet. So there wasn't really a path for professional soccer in Australia. So I was in grade 12. I had the Australian title for soccer in like 3 or 4 weeks. And for years, I'd grown up with the same group of mates. And they'd all seen athletically that I was gifted. And they all wanted me to play in the school, like carnival. And it was called confraternity. And we were in the B comp. And the B comp is like, mate, like the front rowers are 80 kilos. It's terrible, like terrible. So it wasn't like we didn't have footy for a subject, so you couldn't just play footy at our school. Like, that's how much we weren't a sports school. We were a Catholic school, education, principle, really good upbringing. Anyway, so I wasn't going to go because I had national soccer in a few weeks, and the whole knock on me not playing footy growing up was like, you'll get injured for soccer. Anyway, the boys just kept peppering me, and then the school actually said, look, we'll help pay to get you up to Townsville to go to the trip. Anyway, said, you know what, get a week off school with the boys. It's going to be great. We went up there, and after the first day, they said to me, look, what would you do if there was a club interested in you? And I just thought nothing of it. I just thought, look, I'm just having fun with my mates. And by the end of the carnival, I got this award, Player with the Most Potential. And I was really sick. Like, I must have got a bug in like the last night. So I went up there, got the award, thought nothing of it. At this stage, I was like, when you're young, you're so bloody blasé about it, and you don't actually know what's happening. So you're just kind of like, I got an award, that's great, whatever. So I went home, I didn't say anything. And then like a few days later, I told my dad, I got this award, they want me to go to this like development camp for the Broncos. He was like, mate, what are you talking about? And I was like, got this, this player with the most potential. Anyway, so he actually rang the Broncos and somehow got onto Wayne and said, look, my son doesn't play rugby league. He plays soccer. We don't know what the systems are or whatever. And so they said, what, he doesn't even play any rugby league? And it's like, no, he's got nationals for soccer next week. Anyway, so long story short, they said, look, we want him at his elite camp in a few, like straight after the nationals. So I went up there, did the camp, very unskilled, but I had a tendency I fought for everything. I was very fast, had a good attitude. And AFL actually found out about a guy that could play soccer and rugby league. So I went to that camp. They offered me a contract with the under-19s Broncos side. But then AFL sat down with me and offered they would fast-track me to the draft for the Brisbane Lions. Like with the Brisbane Lions, they'd trade me full-time. And so, yeah, I had to choose. I went back to the Queensland Raw. And they said, look, you'll play our league probably in about 2 years. And it was the Broncos. They were the biggest club in sporting Australia. And I decided to go to the Broncos.
And that you're at under 19. So where'd you go from there?
So the first day I rocked up, actually, they said, look, we don't want you in under 19s. We want you in our Queensland Cup side, which was Clydesdales at the time. And so I rocked up to training. I'll take it back. A week before that, I got my old... So this is how much I didn't play footy. I got my old sprinting coach, me and my brother, down at the local athletics that we used to train at. And he was basically making my brother run straight and me tackle him, to trying to teach me how to tackle because I didn't know how to tackle. Anyway, so because I was playing fullback when I was at that most potential, so you don't take, like, it's BCom, you just run. Anyway, so I went to the first training session with the Clydesdales, and this is the best of the best, especially at this period. Like, this is the Broncos. You know, our reserve grade side was like basically an NRL side. I did 2 warm-up tackles on the diamonds, so the pads, and had to stop for the session because my neck started cramping up because I had nothing there, and this was real big boys, and that's how, you know, I was 71 kilos. I put on about 15 kilos in about 3-month period. So it was just a shock to the system. But I was young, I was enthusiastic, and I just, like, everything, you're so naive. You don't realise the great wall in front of you you've got to climb. You're just taking it one step at a time. And yeah, and then I think it was like 2 years later I made my debut.
And how many games the first grade did you play? Because the average rugby league player plays how many games rugby league first grade? Come on, tell me.
You know what?
Come on.
You know what kills me? When I retired or quit, I played 42 NRL games, and that was exactly the average amount of an average NRL player.
So you play the average number of first grade games?
Well, I'm an average NRL player.
That'll do. Most people, yeah, but most people don't even get to average. Most people don't even get to first grade, second grade, or the Clydesdale Cup. What about your brother and your sister? I just want to know a little bit, because I've heard some stories about your brother's is a doctor, or your sister's a doctor. What's the deal?
So my brother is I'm pretty sure, unless I'm getting it wrong, but he's the youngest medical director in the country. So he runs a hospital in Northern Territory. And my sister was the chief editor for Who magazine, and then she moved up to the parent company, and she was like head of video or whatever. But she's just had her second child, so she's on leave at the moment. But my brother, yeah, he's a medical director. So he basically was in England at this side called Nottingham Forest. They offered him a contract, and this helped my decision to play rugby league, because he was homesick and he said, you know what, this isn't for me. Came back to Australia, studied business for about 6 months just so that he could get high distinctions and get him into medical school. Then went to medical school and yeah, kicked on.
So how the fuck did you get into this? I mean, you're playing footy. Tell me about this. Beer. I mean, you love a beer, I guess, but why beer?
So basically, I quit footy, and I always knew that because I'd seen my brother go really well outside of footy and my sister, that the apple can't fall that far from the tree. I must be able to achieve something similar to those guys and girls. And so I always had aspirations to have a career, just didn't know what it was. Anyway, so when I quit, I was really into like Joe Rogan podcasts and everything like that. So I started my electrical apprenticeship. I was working in the mines, and for probably like 3 years, I was doing the apprenticeship, and I was just listening to Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, all that kind of stuff. And I'd always wanted to have my own online show. Even when I was playing rugby league in like 2012 and 11, I wanted to have my own YouTube show. But my biggest issue was like, look, I'm focused on rugby league right now, but even if I'm not focused on rugby league, what topic can I do that I have a point of difference? Like if I start a video game podcast, I've got to compete against the whole world on video games because it's an international, hobby or whatever. And so it basically got to a point where it's like, well, I initially didn't even want to do rugby league because I just wanted to get away from the game. But then I just said to myself, look, this is your point of difference. This is the community that you have. This is the respect you've earned over years of playing. And so I just said, you know what, I'll start in rugby league, as in interviewing the players as a podcast.
As a podcast, yeah.
Yep. And before I knew it, I loved it.
So you set up a podcast called The Locker Room. So what was that about? I mean, is it about talking to rugby league? Is it rugby league players? Is it about getting us insights into the locker room and actually to see what blokes talk about after the game, before the game? What was your idea?
Yeah, so the idea was essentially exactly what you said, get you inside the locker room, but also how can I impact the rugby league community and eventually, by extension, the sporting community in Australia in a positive way. I wanted to get, maybe it was a projection of wanting to get my story out there, I'm not sure, but I wanted to be able to say, look, a lot of these blokes that you see on the field, for example, Paul Gallen, on the field, if you're a Queenslander, you hate Paul Gallen. Yeah. But you listen to a podcast and you're like, mate, he's just a normal bloke that loves this or loves that. And I found that, even after the first few episodes, I started to get feedback of like, I used to hate this bloke, and now he's just a normal bloke. And that was the initial passion. That was the driving force
to bring the best out of everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
It's sort of, because I mean, you're sort of underplaying that a little bit, to be honest with you. Like, because pretty much when you read about rugby league today, particularly rugby league, it's all about negativity.
Yeah.
You got commentator, putting shit on players, putting shit on coaches. We look at the drama that's going on at the moment about Seabold. I mean, like, it's bad news sells, particularly when it comes to rugby league. And, rugby league is that sport that always keeps giving too. There's plenty of bad news out there. But what you've done something diametrically opposed to that. You've gone and concentrated on the good stuff. And what I love about that is that people are actually interested in it, because I think newspapers and TV stations, etc., think everyone wants to hear about the bad shit. Maybe they do, but the negative stuff. But what I'm quite encouraged by is that the fact that people actually like to hear about the good stuff, and that's your go. That's your thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about good things in people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, without tooting my own horn or whatever, I think the reason why a lot of journalists or pundits of the game don't go that route, because it takes skill to be able to provide positive content that's engaging. It takes skill. I could put up a positive post, but it's not as engaging as Seabold rumour blows up club.
Totally.
Whereas if I put up an engaging positive post that's has thought put into it, maybe some statistics saying like, look, you thought this, like for example, Kalen Ponga yesterday, the kind of thought around him this year is not having a good year, solid, but not the best year. Yesterday I put up a post saying, statistically speaking, he's having the best year of his career. And that really engages people. And it takes time, it takes effort. And I guess that's where my skill set lies in. I have a talent to be able to create that quality, positive content.
So you're like a publisher. So you're really a publisher. I mean, you're a publishing house in that respect.
Yep.
You're publishing about, well, in relation to the locker room, you were just publishing then, not now necessarily, but you were just publishing then stories that relate to rugby league, but always making sure that it was from a positive point of view. As you say, most publishers today are all about clicks. And the best thing you get a click is a fire or a bomb or something exotic, like a drama or an affair or drugs or blah blah. They're quite quick, easy hits, and maybe you're right. The journalists probably don't have the time, because the company they work for is probably saying, we got something you need to give us something every day, and we need so many column inches, and I need it from the five of you, and the five of you go find out all the shit that's going on out there, because it sells easier.
Yep. What
you do is you got to apply a lot more thought, and there's a lot more planning.
Yep.
And you actually got to take us through it. You got to take us on a little journey. A podcast helps too, by the way, because you can talk to someone about it.
Absolutely. I think also a big benefit is because I have played NRL, I immediately get that respect from fans of when I talk, it's coming from a place of authenticity. When a journalist, let's say a journalist put up a post of Kalen Ponga's actually having a good year, a lot of people might just go, look, what do you know? Like, what do you know about footy? He's having a good year. No, he's not. I know just as much as you know, because I watch it just as much as you do. Whereas if myself puts it up, you can go, well, I at least know that he's an elite level rugby league player. Therefore, it comes with this kind of like a blue tick, but pretty much.
How do you find the players? If you're going to talk to Kalen Ponga, what is it that you do to make Kalen Ponga feel comfortable to talk to you?
I think I've over probably what's been 5 years, nearly 6 years, I've always had integrity, and that reputation has filtered throughout the players. So they see me as I'm on their side. You know, I'm not on the other side. I'll openly say, even to people that follow the page, I'm biased towards the players, guys. So, like, if there's ever a 50-50 thing where maybe a player's done something wrong, I'll probably still either just not say anything or side with the players. And I think when you're open about that bias, most people can cop it because at least they know you're not trying to trick them or convince them that, oh, yeah, no, I'm unbiased and I'm just saying it like it is. And so for the last...
Well, I actually think you're right. I think the bias is around the other way. I think the bias is towards drama.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch all of this stuff for footy, and I reckon the bias is totally towards drama.
Yeah.
Like, give us some drama to lead the show.
Absolutely.
Especially when it's television.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of like, when I think ethically, like, is it ethical to be biased towards the players? I'm like, well, look, if the scales are tipped so far this way of, you know, against the players, then if I'm just tipping them a bit closer to level, then that kind of helps me sleep at night in the sense that, like, you know, maybe I could be unbiased and just say it like exactly how it is, but there's so much negativity out there. I feel that we kind of just need to bring it back with a bit more positivity towards the players.
Fuck yeah. Look, I love the game Rugby League. I don't understand what it is, this sort of weird thought process that, I've got to read about the thing I love getting destroyed. I actually don't want to read about it getting destroyed.
No,
I want to read facts. I know I do actually want to be introduced to people. So I don't know Paul Gal. I met him once or twice, but I don't know Gal. And all I know is what I hear.
Yep.
It'd be actually nice to be actually able to watch him in a podcast and see the better of him.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
then let him present his best self with somebody who's not trying to pull his pants down.
Exactly.
And then, you know, tickle him up and give him a slap, you know, and just trying to get the wrong response. And I also want to see Gal when he's not performing too. So, you know, normally you see Gallen on the Channel 9 broadcast, or you might hear him on 2GB something, but he's performing. And that's Gallen the professional.
Absolutely.
I'd like to see Gallen just sitting down and chilling out, talking to someone like you.
Yep.
And what's important for me, though, is that I know that you, or they will talk to you, and they'll open up. They feel comfortable with you.
Absolutely.
They're not on guard. They don't think, fuck, this guy's about to stitch me up here, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, there's not a stitch up.
Yep.
And because the general process of most journalists is that they've got to stitch someone up. Like, I know in my own business, not mental business, but my other businesses, if I go out and put out a result that's really good for the year, let's say we did particularly well in 2020, June 2020, and I did this, I did that, and blah, 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 you know, I'm telling my shareholders. As soon as the journalist gets hold of it, one of the things that I know is that the journalists will grab hold of it and they're going to try and say, okay, well, we're going to say he did well because this is what he... But then we're going to sort of start bringing around all the shit that he didn't do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really want to talk to him.
Yep,
because
absolutely.
they feel like they've got an obligation to... They would say proper journalism means I've got to give a balanced view. Well, yeah, but I'm not going to talk to you because I know that you're going to highlight stuff I don't want you to highlight.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've dealt with my shit during the year.
Yep, absolutely.
And I've still come out the other end with a good result.
Yep.
So I don't really want to talk to you. So I won't talk to them. So what you're saying is people will talk to you because they know you're not going to stitch them up on that regard.
Absolutely. And before every single podcast, I say to them, mate, if you walk out here and say, delete the whole thing, Kempy, I'll delete the whole thing. So there's never any bits that you want deleted, even bits where you don't ask me to delete it, but I'm like, oh, probably shouldn't say that. I'll delete it before it even gets out there. And I also think, like, your point with the journalist where they like try to bring up the bad stuff and they say that, oh, that's balance. I think they're always working from this kind of like ideal world where everyone's perfect and everything has to be perfect. And yet, like, that's not how it works. So, for example, as you said, a business, you've had really good results, but a few things didn't work. Well, you're not a machine. You can't do everything perfect.
Totally.
So I don't even see that as a balanced view. I see that as an unrealistic view to say that, oh, I've got to bring all this negative shit up because you did some positive stuff.
Yeah, that's. Well, can I open this up? I'm getting a bit thirsty.
Absolutely.
Wonder if we just how do we do this? There we go. Let me have a tasty beer.
I brought it cold.
Doesn't matter. I'm happy to drink it like it is.
You like the cans, I reckon.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, mate.
Me too. You boys want a beer? Are they allowed to drink?
Yeah, they can have a drink of the beer, boys. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going wrestling after this. Are we still recording? Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'm going wrestling straight after this interview. So the bloke I'll be wrestling is I go and do some MMA training after this, to stand up fighting. Yep. Not on the ground, stand up wrestling, and he'll be able to smell the beer on me. Fuck him anyway. It's all good. So I'm actually going to train with Larry Papadopoulos, the Roosters wrestling trainer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Up at King's Cross Boxing. So cheers, mate. So boys, cheers.
Cheers
to the crew.
Cheers.
So that tastes pretty good. So you got the locker room. You got your podcast. I mean, how many people got following you now? What's the deal?
So we've got 100.
How many downloads you had? Do you reckon? Do you know?
So the podcast, we just hit 150,000 downloads last month, and that's something that we just kind of dipped. So there was a period where we focused more on the social media side of things. We still did the podcast, but I didn't really push it and wasn't as regular. But since this season, now I release 2 podcasts a week. Obviously, I can't have...
2 a week, that's a lot.
Yeah, but I love it. And I've got it all set up at home. So I just, sit down. I do everything myself. So it's very easy for me to just, for example, if you were to do it, you'd have to sit down for a few hours, edit. You got so much more shit to do than I do. Whereas me, that's what I do is edit it. I can record it and stuff like that. And I don't really have that many other commitments other than creating content. Obviously, I have to run the company. But at this stage, it's not that it's running itself, but it's not at scale yet, even though we've sold, I think, 20,000 cases in the last four months since launch. So, but it's not at a point where I'm getting called into meeting after meeting after meeting. So eventually we'll have to bring in someone. Anyway, that's beside the point. 150,000 downloads on the podcast, and then we have 117,000 followers on Instagram, 130,000 followers on Facebook.
Well, that's pretty good in a short period of time, too, relatively speaking.
Absolutely.
And I guess I want to know, how'd you go from doing a podcast and selling a beer? I mean, was it or did you just say, oh shit, I got this really good following, and I got this good idea, and I got people who want to support me, and I know I've got really good so-called influencers. Bloody hell, how can I leverage that? I'm going to sell a beer. I mean, what was the thought process?
Well, I just I kind of saw a few years ago that with the way Instagram or the internet works is that there's no gatekeepers anymore to creating pretty much anything, and so I thought, look, the perfect business model, in my opinion, is in any retail business is if the marketing is free. So why don't I create I consider Bloke and About like a sports network. So basically like Fox Sports, but online, but a positive one. That's the way I see it in my mind.
Yep.
So why don't I create an online sports network that's sponsored by its own products? So it's a kind of ecosystem within itself. You go buy a case of beer, you get a free sports network. Or you watch a sports network and it just kind of feeds itself. The beer gets bigger, the sports network, and vice versa. And so, I wanted to remove the cost of advertising. I also didn't want to have to rely on advertisers when it comes to podcasts and the show. And so the business model, I thought logically didn't have any holes in it. It just would take time to build up that audience. And we got to a point where it got so big that it got big enough where I had enough capital to initially launch the beer. And then we got a chance to take over the bar. But when I took over the bar, I had to make the tough decision of stop selling the beer in stores. So we only had the beer initially when I come onto your podcast initially. We had the beer in stores about 3 months max. But because we got the bar, I looked at things and everyone disagreed. But I looked at things and said, look, this is too risky to be we don't have enough capital. If anything goes wrong, we don't have the capital to support a beer in stores and also the bar. So I pulled the beer out of the stores, focused on the bar for the last 3 years, and eventually we actually got some partners that come on board, some investors, one investor that came on board probably about 6 months ago, and that gave us the capital to launch again correctly and properly and
back in the stores, back in the liquor stores.
Exactly, but a much more professional outfit in the sense that we have capital to buy large quantities.
Let's just talk about your beer. So it's a lager.
Yep.
It's your own formula, your own recipe.
Yep. As in, I liaise with a brewer, and
but if someone brews it for you, but you've got to tell them. You've got to say, well, this is what I want. This is the taste.
Yep.
And you have to, and they build a formula.
Yep.
And off the back of that, they then produce it for you. Can you tell us where you're getting it brewed in Australia or overseas?
In Australia, absolutely in Australia. So we'll try to, with everything that we do, we'll try to keep everything in Australia. So with the recipe, we actually got the recipe done by a person that we knew he's the head brewer for a pretty big craft beer place in Sydney. We can't say who it is because he's at the. It's a different different brewery. But anyway, we got that recipe years and years ago. So the place we use now is Hawker's Brewing. We probably will move it back to Sydney because we were in Sydney initially in Tribe Brewing. But unfortunately, something happened and they were going to delay our launch. So that's why we had to move down to Melbourne. But yeah, so we brew it down there. We get our packaging from another source and we get it transferred over to Hawker's Brewing. They package it all up, send it up. Now we're just in the process of making sure cost of sale is reduced because we can buy at scale. That's our biggest issue at the moment is we're right in that spot of like we haven't hit scale, therefore we can't really demand the dropping in the cost of brewing. Also like logistics, for example, logistics is probably our biggest issue at the moment when it comes to cost. Just the growing pains at the moment, going from cool startup to scale is kind of the process.
I think it's important that we explain a little bit of this. I mean, because I have been involved. I did own some craft craft beer businesses many years ago before they became popular, and I sold out before everybody else. And of course, now they're all making a fortune. But anyway, I have some experience in it. But just to break it down a little bit for everybody listening to this. So. What Denan's talking about here is that packaging is reasonably expensive. First, you've got to brew the stuff. You've got to get someone to brew it for you. In other words, you've got to go to a brewing place, and whoever that might be, then they usually brew lots of other people's beers too. You give them the formula, they brew it to your formula, right? And hopefully every batch comes out tastes exactly the same. Yeah. And then it gets put in a can like that, which is all printed out, and it's going to be put in a box like that, and then it's got to be distributed. It's got to be sent out everywhere. The game here is to be able to sell your beer at the store, the liquor store, at a price which is not too much removed from what everybody else is selling their beer for. There's a few other tricks too. You've got to try and get to the front of the store. That's not easy to do. You don't want to be stuck down the back of the store because usually people buy the beer that's sitting right at the front.
Yep.
Unless you specifically go in there asking for a specific beer. Most people won't buy it, and it's also price driven. Like the price of your carton of beer is really important.
Yep.
You can't sell, or Denan can't sell his beer at say $40 a case.
No way.
If everyone else is selling 30, you got to be around that territory.
Yep.
But also that then that sort of then comes back to what Denan's point was. What's the cost of producing my beer? But if you don't produce enough of it because you're not selling enough of it, then you don't produce it at a cheap enough price. Yep. So the more of this shit you produce, the cheaper the production company, the production run will be, which means the cheaper you can sell it for, and the more easy it is to maintain your margin. So to some extent, there's not a lot of margin if you're trying to meet the market at the moment. You wouldn't be making a lot of money out of the beer.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, because and the only time you will make a lot of money out of the beer is when you start selling shitloads of it.
Absolutely.
And the game of selling shitloads of it is that if you can't get to the front of the store, because a lot of the stores are owned by Coles and Woolworths, and most of them actually.
Yeah, I think it's like Woolworths, so Dan Murphy's, they're actually, they own about 75 cents on every dollar. I was told by someone that works closely in there that they sell of alcohol in Australia. So they are the dominant player.
By far.
By far.
And for you to get the front of their store is not that easy.
No.
Because there's deals being done all around the joint. So, because this brings me back to probably my most important point, is how do I promote my beer? When I had my craft beer businesses, we didn't know how to promote the beer to get enough sales, to be able to get enough, to be able to brew it cheap enough to make enough money. Yeah. Because there was no such thing when I was doing it as internet or Instagram or all that sort of stuff that didn't exist. So you had to go and actually spend a whole lot of money on television or radio, or go and sponsor New South Wales or something.
Yeah, yep.
And it cost too much money. You just couldn't do it.
But
you've worked out that, as you said, you can use your own platforms to advertise your product.
Yep.
And you can use players to some extent to talk about your product.
Absolutely.
Because they happily do it for that matter. So you've worked out a way of putting yourself in a position where people will walk into a store and say, I want Bloke in a bar. That's what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Where is it? It might not even be at the front of the shop. It might be down the back. But the liquor store owner is going to get it for you.
Yep.
No matter what. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. So the whole setup from the start was, look, imagine Fox Sports had Fox Beer and they put it on every single one of their shows.
Yeah.
That's essentially what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's exactly as you said, people go in, like, for our biggest issue for the first 8 weeks was demand. So we couldn't keep up with demand. We were selling out. It got so bad that stores were putting up stickers saying 1 6-pack per person. That's
great though.
Oh mate, it was
That's great stuff. I'd be taking photographs of that and sticking up on Instagram.
Absolutely. We got photos, everything. It was honestly the launch, and our numbers continue to grow. So it's not like just it's it went crazy, went down. Our biggest issue. Put it this way: we had a 6-month goal, and I said to the one other guy that I hired to work for me, that's the beer sales rep. I said, if you hit this 6-month goal, I'll give you a bonus. We probably did that 6-month goal in the first 2 to 3 hours of launch, and we do that every single week. We do the 6-month goal. We do more than the 6-month goal every single weekend now.
Wow.
So it just exploded. It exploded. And as you said, I think a key for us is we are in a lot of independent bottlers is what we do. And so that you're totally right when it comes to putting the beer at the front of a store or pack, placing it in this right spot. So we do something each week where I go out myself and do a taste testing in their store, trying to drive traffic to their store, creating relationships with the independent owners, because I understand they're small business owners. Like, they don't have my beer on. My beer is not going to make or break their business. But if I try and help them out a little bit, they're going to help me out as well. And so we've got pretty much prime spots in nearly all of our liquor stores, because I'm going out there, showing them respect, showing them I'm grateful, and also driving sales for them. So
and look, for everybody who's listening, we're talking about is merchandising, pretty simple merchandising, but it requires effort. But you personalise merchandising. So, I mean, if I walk in a store and I'm going in there because I want to buy a VB or something, or whatever I want to buy, doesn't matter. I might not know what I want to buy, I just want to get some beer. And I walk in and see the bloke from the Bloke in a Bar demonstrating or talking about it or whatever, I'm definitely going to say I'll try some of it. Well, I'll get a case of that. Even if it's a couple of dollars more expensive, I'll probably buy it anyway. And then if I drink it, if it's good and it tastes okay, then if all of a sudden I realise, oh shit, there's a whole lot of people following this. Why don't I look at this on Instagram? Yep. And then I sort of get roped into it all. Yep. And that's the process. Absolutely. And the next thing you know, you're buying more of it. Yep. And you're talking more about it. And then I don't know about you, but like, whatever I decide that I like the taste of, in this case beer, for some reason I have this thing in my mind I've got to justify it to myself and start telling everybody about it. Like, I've got to start telling, like, if I find someone who makes really good fresh sourdough, yep, sliced, yep, I want to fucking tell everybody about it.
I'm the same.
Like you're saying, I'm a justification deal. Like, I've got to fucking start talking about my own shop, Yep. And that, I think a lot of people like that. Like, so, like, you come over my place and all of a sudden you're going to give you a beer. And I say, look, I just got these. You want to try one of these? I pull the beer out and I open up and I'm sort of trying to promote it for you. Like, I become your best promoter.
Absolutely.
And I see all the footy players that follow you. Like, I see Latrell. Latrell's mad for it. Like, yep, he's always putting stuff up.
Absolutely.
And he's got a lot of followers, and he's quite influential too.
Absolutely, like massive. And, and the thing is that all the Latrell situation. I've only met Latrell once or twice, but that actually all stems from over the years. I've never bashed him. I've never said anything negative about him. I've just talked about his footy and been positive, and he's appreciated that so much that he's given back to me in ways that would cost me. Imagine 4X or VB went to him and said we want to do a deal.
Totally,
it cost him. A lot of money.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And so that's just been a really good, I guess, measure of just treating people well. Comes back, so it'll come back eventually.
Well, maybe what it's also a measure of, Denan, is how much people want to be treated well. Maybe if it go further, maybe people are just sick of being treated like shit.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe footy players are sick of being looked at as scoundrels and irresponsible and no good, and I know Latrell's got his own personal stuff that he's dealing with. His Indigenous background. I mean, but just putting that aside, I mean, Latrell's probably sick of people just having a crack at everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when someone's nice to him, he just appreciates it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a fucking clever. To me, that's a totally clever way of marketing. I mean, apart from the way you package your stuff, I think it looks very good. And I think the ochre colour is a great colour. And the whole thing looks good. It tastes good too, but the whole thing looks good. It's a good feel. Getting people to be influential people to be able to say something about what the brand stands for.
Yep.
is gold.
Oh,
It's fucking gold. I want to know. I know. Can you explain to me where the hell did you come up with the name? Bloke in a bar.
mate, it's so okay. So I had some NRL players, Shandor Earl actually.
Yeah.
He was really interested in coming on, and he wanted to do a show with me, the podcast or whatever. And we were trying to, or I was trying to think of a name, and basically, because basically he would be the talent, and I would create the show for him. I would edit it. I would put it up on my platform or whatever. And yeah, for I don't know, a week or two, I just kept thinking about what's a cool name. And my best ideas usually come when I'm like between sleep and awake. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Maybe your mind's free or whatever. And yeah, that's when it came, Bloke in a bar. And when I first said it, like even to Sandor, he was like, "Oh, I don't know about that." And I was like, "Trust me, it's confronting. It's zany. It's wacky, but you remember it.
Totally.
You remember it." And so yeah, I come up with I named the show Bloke in a Bar, but the main, I guess, aim was to be remembered. Do you remember that name? And what is your reaction when people read it? And the reaction on the phone when I say my email's blokeinabar@gmail.com or the business is named Bloke in a Bar, people will laugh, they'll giggle, even if they're laughing at it. It's just to get a reaction, not in a controversial way, but just to be remembered. And yeah, and so as soon as we got the name and I set the studio up for him, that's when everything started ticking over. Oh, Bloke in a Bar. Well, that would actually really suit a beer. And then the show, he got too busy to do it, so I started doing the show instead of him doing the show. And then and then it just kept like growing. And as all good ideas do, they just slowly build. And then eventually you're like, oh, that's it. That's what we'll do. And so yeah, the name Bloke in a Bar, and eventually it probably just turned into Bloke. I assume that'll be the.
Well, I want to talk about the word bloke. I often talk about this in terms of names for businesses. One of the most famous names ever is Virgin, and if you do some examination of it, it doesn't really matter whether people like the name or not, and to some extent controversy is good, but as long as I remember it. So it's a name that's memorable, Virgin. If you look at the word gin, it's actually quite a strong sounding word. It's 2 syllables, but it has strong letters and strong sounds. It's therefore it makes it more memorable because it sort of impacts your brain or your ears when you say it. Wizard was the same sort of word. Wizard was one word with 2 syllables, but again, I use that sort of Virgin process to actually come up with the name Wizard. Bloke is a very strong word.
Yeah,
it's a really strong word. And it's very memorable. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. I don't know if it's just an Australian word, but it's very Australian. Yeah, it's very blokey, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. You can sort of say, well, it's a bit sexist, but whatever. But you still remember it. And I think that point you're making. And if anybody out there, if you're thinking about naming your business and you've got to do a retail name and you want something that people remember, there's no point marketing something if the name can't be remembered. As long as your ass points to ground, you can market something. But if bloody name's no good, people won't remember how to find you. But
absolutely,
Bloke is a smart name. It's just a brilliant name, particularly when you associate with beer. And then the footy guys, and by the way, probably the footy girls too, they get it. It can sort of become cultish.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, what it looks like to me, you've turned this to a cultish thing.
Yeah, I like to say community.
Yeah, community is a nice way of saying it. It's a positive way, but it's not a bad cult, but it is a cult.
Yeah, it's
cultish.
I took a lot of inspiration, and I know this is such a cliche answer, but from Apple. So the way Apple works is basically it's a computer company that makes phones, but you don't think about that. You see Apple, and it exists externally from a product.
Yeah.
And that's the way with Bloke in a Bar. Yes, we are a beer, but we also sell merchandise, and the merchandise flies off the shit. Like we sell thousands of shirts. And so, got your jumper.
Funnily enough, there we go. Bloke. I love it. Bloke. I'll be wearing that later.
Nice.
Good colours too.
Yeah, that's the whole feel of it. So when we did the design and the branding was, I took in pictures from the 1990s of footy and 1980s. And the whole feel is like a throwback to, when blokes were blokes and it was okay to be a bloke, and not the negative side of it, but the positive side of being a bloke, about honesty, integrity, and being there for your mates.
By the way, do you think it's still okay to be a bloke? Or do you think it's I mean, like, do we have to worry about that shit? Like, I'm old enough not to worry about it. I'm also old enough to remember when a bloke was a bloke. Or do we have to be, everything and really conscious of all those other things? I mean, do we have to give in to pressure?
Look, I think I'll pass this from my partner's perspective, my wife. She says to me that, she wants more blokes. She's dated guys that were not necessarily very blokey or strong or, decisive and, honesty and all the stuff that gets conflated with negative masculinity. A lot of women, in my opinion, again, I'm not speaking for them, actually like that yin and yang environment of like, that's a bloke, he's strong, he's disciplined, he, blokey things. So I think there has been a kind of a conflation of there's two sides of masculinity. There's the dumb side where blokes do stupid shit, they fight each other, they do that. There are negative sides, absolutely. But there is also a lot of positivity that blokes bring. And I think that's what the brand tries to shine a light on. Is like, not the negative stuff. That's anyone can be a dickhead, whether it's a female or male. It's the positive side of masculinity, mateship, camaraderie, working together, all of that stuff. And it has really resonated. So, look, I do think there has been a push against the bloke, but I also believe that if you're a real bloke, you don't listen to that. You stick to your principles and you do as your father or the male figure in your life showed you in a positive light, in my opinion.
So, because I guess we're getting a bit deep here, but like, I actually want to go there. Not too many people in business, a lot of people in business would be worried about promoting the word bloke. You're not, because you're saying I'm just promoting the positive side of it. I'm not worried about the negative side of it. You guys think what you like. Yep. But I'm promoting the positiveness of a bloke. And by the way, if that only appeals to 50% of the population, that's pretty fucking good.
Yeah,
because that's a big part of the population. But it's a brave thing to be able to shine a spotlight on a word called bloke, which has all sorts of connotations to all sorts of people. But at the end of the day, not everyone's going to be a customer.
No.
And I think there's too much emphasis today trying to please everyone in the world. Like, oh shit, because when you do that, you become paralyzed. You don't please anyone because you don't do anything. You don't do anything. Absolutely. You end up calling it, I don't know what you call it. You call it some other name. It might be, XYZ, because you sanitize the process so much and you analyze it so much,
yep.
It becomes paralytic.
Yep.
It's dumb for me. And I quite like the fact that you're prepared to stand up. You got the guts to say, look, I like the positive attributes of what are traditionally considered a bloke, at least in this country. I'm going to call my business Bloke in a Bar, or my beer Bloke in a Bar, and maybe one day it becomes Bloke. And I'm proud enough to stand up and promote that. I mean, there's not many people around like that. And I think that actually wins you prizes. I think that wins admiration. And I think that actually adds to the brand. And if what you're saying is going to shine a light on those things that represent a bloke, there's nothing wrong with that either.
No,
and maybe every single person you get in has a different attribute who comes into your show. They have different attributes. And as long as they're good quality, positive attributes that add to society and community and to their family, then what the fuck? I mean, what's wrong with that?
Absolutely, and that's where I'm extremely confident we will have a positive impact on blokes. I'm extremely confident in saying if you want your son or your partner or whatever to emulate the traits I'm trying to promote, I think they are good traits for men to have, and I think that they will make the world a better place. So it's not this or that or blokes are good or bad and women are good or bad. It's a set of principles that I feel that a lot of blokes, it's kind of the water's been muddied as to, what it is to, I mean, these days, if you said to a 16, 17-year-old male, what is it to be a bloke? A lot of young men wouldn't know, and I do think there is a whole generation of young men that are struggling to find identity. When I grew up, my father, he helped disadvantaged kids, but he taught me so much about honesty, integrity, standing by your mates, all the good stuff. He didn't teach me, go out and bash some bloke and, drive cars fast and do dangerous things. Like, yes, that is a negative thing that a lot of men fall victim to, especially the 18 to 25-year-old, full of testosterone and just do stupid shit. Like, for thousands of years, they'd go away to war and get rid of all of that shit, whereas we don't really have that anymore. So
They create their own wars.
Exactly. And so if we can somehow, long term, create an environment where young men can go, that isn't the way to go, this whole carrying on like a dickhead and thinking you're tougher than the next bloke and blah, blah, blah. And we go, this is actually what a bloke is. It's about being sturdy, respectful, disciplined. Look at mixed martial arts, in my opinion, is such a perfect example of like, you can learn so much as a bloke from that. You can learn, it's not about being tougher. It's about discipline. It's about respecting your opponent or your teammate. It's about understanding that there's always a bigger, badder wolf than you, so don't carry on like you're a hero. All of that stuff. That's what I'm trying to promote. So the larrikin side is fun, and there is some good things about being have a few beers, have a bit of a laugh, but not the negative nonsense of like a dickhead. Just a dickhead. Everyone knows what a dickhead is, whether female or male. Just a dickhead that's carrying on.
So, I mean, do you in relation to this, do you have any programs? Are you considering programs for the future where you go into schools and you talk to, or somebody from your organisation goes to schools and talks to young people, young men, for example, about the sorts of things that are maybe the attributes or the virtues of a good man?
Yeah, absolutely. So my dad already does programs where he takes groups of young men that may have come from a broken house. So usually it's where the father has absent or isn't there or whatever, and he'll take them out and do like a mock army camp and things like that. So we have plans eventually. Look, I don't want to go into it too soon. I think we'll have to be much more established as a brand, but we have plans eventually to have nights in pubs where it's just a bloke night. You come down, you have a beer, you just talk any issue you got. It's not too serious in the sense of a really sterile environment. It's at a pub over a beer, and you just talk to your mates about whatever it is. We definitely have plans to go down that route eventually and try to positively impact men and young men. I mean, I think male suicide has actually increased recently over the last
Well, we're one of the worst in the world.
It's one of the worst in the world, and I think that it's going to take other men to help men not do that, and that is the end goal. Obviously, we've got a long way to. We've got all other moving pieces to get there, but the end goal, it starts with rugby league and trying to help the rugby league community. Then it extends to the sporting community, and then I hope eventually that Bloke as a brand can be seen as a positive impact to masculinity in Australia, not a negative one. Positive impact to just society, really.
But it's also okay to be masculine.
Absolutely.
You don't, by being masculine, you're not denigrating females.
If anything, you're raising it up, in my opinion. You're raising up the femininity and praising it and giving it if they need a platform, giving it a platform to be the best it can be. That's what I feel that a man should always do is put his family, whether it be his kids or his wife, in the best position they can be in if they want that help. If they don't want that help, that's fine too. That's, in my opinion, that's what...
It's quite an interesting... it's quite interesting. Like we're talking to someone here who's got a podcast that talks to footy players, who's got a beer brand, and all of a sudden now we're talking about standards of virtues for young men. That's a big leap, but it's quite admirable from my point of view, and I think it actually adds to your brand.
Yeah.
Your objectives and your purpose. I mean, that's really your purpose. It seems to be your purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's probably one of the reasons why it's so successful. It's probably the reason why it's not a big ask for you to get influential rugby league players to come and say something about your beer.
Yeah.
Because I guess they get it. I mean, they might not get it specifically, but they just get it. They say, well, I want to talk to this guy. I feel right, and it's okay for me to speak the way about what I feel,
yep.
and it's actually okay for me to speak about topics that ordinarily I wouldn't want to talk about around my teammates, and ordinarily, like as a society, sometimes we feel embarrassed to talk about masculinity.
Absolutely,
it's like you're going to get hammered.
Absolutely,
and you can't. And by the way, just sitting here with a beer, that's sometimes associated with larrikinism, but actually, well, for me, to be honest with you, why I'm happy to have a beer now, I'm celebrating something that I'm really happy with that you're saying. I'm actually celebrating that we can be a bloke,
yep.
But at the same time, by being a bloke, it doesn't mean I'm disrespectful to anyone else.
No way.
Cheers.
Cheers.
That's
Absolutely.
really brilliant.
Absolutely.
I'm really glad to have you back, Denan. Like, I mean, especially in my own environment. This is sort of my office here, and I sit on the other side of they're over there on a desk, but this is my make-believe studio here. But it's really good to see how far you've advanced your brand. It's really good to see how far you've advanced your podcast. It's really good to see how far you've advanced your beer brand, your actual beer. But for me, the biggest thing I'm getting out of this is how far you're advanced your purpose and your objectives and actually your messaging.
Yep.
I mean, like, to be frank with you, you've sort of grown another leg. Like, you're way, way further advanced ahead of where you were up here intellectually about what you're doing and what you stand for. Yep. And there's just no wonder why you've been so successful. I watch your stuff. I follow your Instagram at least. I don't really get Facebook much, but I'm on Instagram all the time, and I'm watching what you put up. I think some of the stuff you're doing is brilliant, and now I've got a better sense of why.
Yeah,
I appreciate you coming in, and I really appreciate sharing some of your deeper thoughts about what the hell you're doing for this business and why you're doing it for our community. This is our community.
Absolutely.
NRL's our community.
Absolutely.
And it's well shared. I did want to finish with one final question. How old are you these days?
How old am I?
Yeah.
33.
Just a kid. That's amazing. And like, if you look at some of the beer brands, some of the craft beer brands, you're going to get very tempted soon, because if you look at Balter, B-A-L-T-E-R.
Yeah, Balter, I know Balter.
Mick Fanning and those guys.
I took a lot of inspiration from them.
Yeah, well, a mate of mine, David Gingell, was one of the shareholders of that. And,
okay.
And I speak Gingell all the time about it. And they've sold that, right? But for a crazy number. But, like, big influencers, like mostly surfers, but big influencers in relation to that beer brand. And it's a good drop too. And
Great beer.
They did brilliantly out of that. They distributed, they produced, and they did very, very well in terms of, building bars and all that sort of stuff around their brand. You're going to get tempted or seduced at some stage by, one of the big beer companies.
Yep.
And I hope that you get everything out of this that you deserve and that you want and that you've ever wished for.
Yep.
But just remember, on the day that you get tapped on the shoulder, a bit like the day when you went up to Brisbane and you played that game of footy for your school, and someone tempted you to come and play for the Broncos, think long and hard about what you do.
Yeah.
And whether you sell your livelihood.
Yep.
Or whether you stick with it and just make shitloads of money by selling your beer in the shops. That's going to be a really interesting stage in your life, and I can't wait for that day to happen. And if you want to reach out to me when that happens and asking me my advice, I'd be really happy to help you. But I know for sure, the bigger you become, the more noise you make, and the more successful you become, the faster it is you're going to get that tap on the shoulder, just like you got tapped on the shoulder by the Broncos. Yep. I can see it coming.
Yeah, mate, we've had people sniff around, absolutely. But I'm in a position now where, look, material things, although they're great, it's not my purpose. In the sense that, don't get me wrong, I want to make up a lot of money. Let's not get that twisted.
Sure, you got family and everything.
Absolutely. But there's a point in my head where that no longer becomes the goal, in the sense that once we get to, let's say you get to the 100% of like X amount of money, everything past that is purpose driven for me. It's impact driven. It really resonated with me when you said it's our community. And I think we got to protect that. The NRL community, the Rugby League community, we have to protect that, because there are people externally from us that don't care about it, and they'll rip it apart, and we'll be left with nothing, and they'll be left with all the money. They'll suck everything out of the game. And
it will change too. The business will change. And I can tell you now, there's not a lot of difference between having, like if this becomes worth $10 million when you own it, but someone offers you $100 million, there's not much difference between how you live your life with 10 compared to 100.
Yeah.
So, just think about it when the day comes, that seduction day comes. We all get it. If we're doing something really good, we all get that seduction day. And largely what they do is they play on our own ego, and they draw us along, and they tell us how brilliant we are, and then they go, here's a check, and can I buy it from you? And we think to ourselves, shit, that's it. I've reached it. That's the holy grail. But when you get there, give me a call and we'll talk about it.
I would, I appreciate that you would actually, let me call you about something like that. And I just want to say, people that are listening or watching, I'm assuming on behalf of, I just want to say thank you for everything you do, because from what I've read and what I know of you, you don't really get anything out of this.
No.
so for you to spend all this time giving, let's say I make $100 million off this. You were responsible for part of that. Your last podcast, I've done heaps of podcasts, and it has resonated with me, and I've thought about it so many times, the things you said, like you told me, what if something happens to you, if you get injured, how does the business continue? All of these tips and stuff that you gave me have just impacted me, and I just want to say you do this for pretty much nothing other than your own purpose, and I just want to say thank you so much for absolutely everything you do. I appreciate it.
You're a champion. Thanks, mate. I love the beer. Go and buy it. Listen to his podcast. Back him if you believe in our community.